Hello, student. This is Dr. Quay, your professor for Business 280. This is Introduction to International Business. Well, welcome to spring semester. Well, my original plan was to go over the syllabus, that's the expectations and whatnot in the syllabus, and also walk you through the electronic classroom, that is Blackboards, where you can get all the information, all the necessary information for the course. But because the campus is closed through Sunday, we are unable to do that. So that's why I'm recording the lecture. So we'll just go on with the lecture. And when we meet next week Saturday, I hope that will be the case. No snow and no closures, and we can discuss. We can do all the housekeeping stuff. So today for this lecture, what I'm going to do is we just focus on um, um, the first chapter. So let's see um, what the first topic is. Now, chapter one focuses on globalization, its importance, and all the things that you need to know that are influencing global trade today. So, definition of globalization is it says the shift towards a more integrated and interdependent world economy. Now, the markets, national markets are no longer isolated. So what I mean is that U.S. market is not isolated from the Canadian market, also or the UK market, the European Union. Things that happen in all these other markets does influence things in the market here in the U.S. The world is moving away from a more self-contained national economies and moving towards interdependent on each other, integrated global system. So that's what we're facing now. We cannot isolate. But what is a globalized market, or what is the globalization of markets? Well, a few statistics here says firms of all sizes benefit and contribute to the globalization of markets. Now, we see here it says 97% of all U.S. exporters have less than 500 employees, and 98% of all small and mid-sized German companies participate in international markets. As I had said earlier, things that are happening in the German market, Canadian market, African market do have a way to affect us in the markets here in the US. So what is the production, globalization of production? Firms source goods, that is offshore or outsource goods and services from location around the globe to capitalize on national differences in costs. We've had so many examples of where U.S. companies have moved their production to China and other countries. Nike is a good example. I don't know of any Nike shoes that are manufactured in the U.S. If some, it's not something, it's something that could change, but right now, none of the Nike shoes are manufactured in the US. Now, the argument is that companies can lower their overall cost structure when they move things out of the country, improve the quality or functionality of their production offering. Now, is that the case? Is it true? Maybe it worked some years back, but is it still the case now? Well, as we go through the course, we're going to learn and then we can come to conclusions as to whether this is the case or not. So why do we need global institutions? What do they do? How do they contribute to globalization? Let's look at a few examples. We have General Agreement of Tariffs on Trade, GATT, one institution, the World Trade Organization, WTO, we have International Monetary Fund, IMF, the World Bank, the United Nations, and the G20 countries. Now, as we move along in the course, we would pick each of these institutions and would kind of expand on them. But for now, I just list them just to give you an example. Now, these institutions help manage, regulate, and police the global marketplace. They also help to promote establishment of multinational treaties to govern the global business system. So we need these institutions to make sure that we are all in sync with the way we do things. One country or one region doesn't have um, um, more advantage over the other, unfair advantage over. what do globalization institutions do? World Trade Organization, they kind of the police the world trading system, make sure that nations or states adhere to the rules laid down in the trade treaties, promote or lower barriers to trade and investment. And as of 2013, they have 159 members. I think it's still the same right now. Now, this is a video, but I'm going to skip it. We can watch that video later when we are in class. What did they do? We continue. Let's look at International Monetary Fund. It was established in 1944 to maintain order in the international monetary system. Now, monetary system is how we, in terms of we have different monetary system, but when we're dealing with global trade, we have to make sure that there's some kind of global standards that we use. The IMF helps countries get stabilized. We'll talk further on that later in the course. They lend at least the lenders of last resort for countries in crisis. Argentina, Indonesia, Mexico, Russia, South Korea, Thailand, Turkey, and recently Greece have had financial crisis, and they've had to call on the IMF to help them. We also have the World Bank, also created in 1944, to promote economic development through low interest interest loans for infrastructure. As I had stated earlier, we would further expand on these. We have the United Nations, and then we have the G20 countries. Now I've listed some of the countries that are in this group. So we'll move on to the next um, slide. Now, something that is very important is we need to understand what is driving globalization. So first we'll look at a decline in barriers to free flow of goods, services, and capital. A lot of countries are opening their doors for foreign companies to come in. So they reduce their tariffs. So it says average tariffs are now at just 4%. Tariffs are like taxes levied on foreign goods. So this opens the door for foreign companies to come in. More favorable environment for FDI. FDI is foreign direct investment. So we have statistics. Global stock of FDI was 20.4 trillion in 2011. This is, and it continues to grow, and it kind of facilitates global production. Now let's look at the technological changes. Processors, telecommunication, internet, information backbone, and global economy, transportation technology. All these things have changed and have improved significantly. So we see that global trade is bringing different countries closer than ever. So what does globalization mean to a firm or a corporation? Lower barriers to trade and investment means firms can view the world rather than single country as a market. Base production in the optimal location for that activity. Basically, you can move your production to a place where you can kind of get the ultimate or optimal benefit, reduce cost. But firms may also find their home market under attack by foreign firms. So even though we're saying it's a good thing and we are benefiting, there is also some drawbacks as to what this is all about. And some people are feeling our national economy is feeling that pressure. Technological changes means lower transportation costs, lower cost information processing, lower cost global communication networks, networks and global media. So we can actually get things from different countries in a day. We can make money transfers to another country in 24 hours and so forth. So this is a big deal. How has the world output and world trade changed? A few statistics here. In 1960, the US accounted for almost 40% of world economic activity. By 2012, the US accounted for just 23%. Now, this is a reduction. So a similar trend occurs in other developed countries. In contrast, the share of world output accounted for by developing nations is rising. So basically, what we're seeing here is that the share of trade in developing countries is rising while ours, that's the US, is reducing. So we got to come up with plan B on how to get this going. This is expected to account for more than 60% of the world's economy by 2020. China is driving this change a lot. So let's look at the visual. See, in the US, in the 80s, look at what is going on. US was doing very well. And now look at where it is. In 2013, look at the developing countries. This is what is happening. They are moving up. US, look at it. The blue is the US. It's really low. So as I said, I hope that the visual will help you see what's going on. We need to step up again here. All right, let's move to the next slide. Multinational, what is a multinational enterprise? Any business that has productive activities in two or more countries. So a country that operates in another country. Now, since the 1960s, the number of non-US multinationals have risen. The number of multinationals, mini multi, that is small businesses, has also risen. So a growth in global business. We have, it says, another reason or driver is that many former communist nations in Europe and Asia are now committed to democratic politics and free market economies. So you can see that a lot of these former communist countries are now becoming democratic, and they are now open their market. Have entered the market. So this creates new opportunities for international business, but there are signs of growing unrest in some of the totalitarian countries. This is work in progress. China and Latin America are also moving towards greater free market. I don't need to say more, but China is all over the place, and they keep growing. So, happening. I hope this kind of paints the vivid picture of what is going in the world market. And also, when you listen to the news, I hope that you would look at, if you don't listen to these things, since you're in this class, it would be a good idea for you to be kind of paying attention to what is going on in the world market. The world is moving more towards a global economy system. And we also have globalization is now inevitable. It's here to stay. Globalization also brings risk. The financial crisis that swept through Southeast Asia in the late 90s, and we also have our 2008 financial crisis also moved around the world. So what happened in the U.S. also economy a good thing. Supporters believe that increased trade and cross-border investment means lower prices for goods and services, greater economic growth, higher consumer income, and more jobs. While, on the other hand, critics worry that globalization will cause job losses, environmental degradation, cultural imperialism of global media and mid-sized enterprises. Anti-globalization protesters now regularly show up at most major meetings. So what do you think? We can discuss this in class. Do you think it's a good thing to send production abroad or keep them at home? And does it lead to job losses? This is open for discussion when class. How does globalization affect jobs and income? Well, critics argue that falling barriers to trade are destroying manufacturing jobs in advanced countries. Supporters also contend that the benefit of these trends outweigh the cost. So countries will specialize in what they do most efficiently and trade for other goods. Now, I put the Oreo logo up here because it's actually a video where Nabisco made an announcement that they are moving production to Mexico. Now, I took that very personal because I like Oreos, and Oreos is an all-American cookies. So why should they move it to Mexico? And that was something that I took really personal. But it tells you, it's an example of what is going on. And it has now become a political issue where the current government is trying to bring businesses back to the U.S. So this is really something that we have to look at what is going on in the global market. So what does globalization, or how does globalization affect labor policies and the environment? Well, critics argue that firms avoid the cost of adhering, that is, following labor and environmental regulations by moving productions to countries where such regulations do not exist. So the argument here is that because of the maybe stringent regulations, a lot of U.S. companies will rather move their production to other countries where they are more lax and to take advantage of the cost savings. Now, whether the cost savings is passed on to consumers, that's another argument. Now, supporters also claim that tougher environmental and labor standards are associated with economic progress. So as countries get richer from free trade, they implement tougher environmental and labor regulation. This is also open for discussion. So there are so many schools of thought on these issues. So we would as we move along in the course. What about how does globalization affect national sovereignty? Now, in today's global economy, shifting economic power away from national government towards supranational actually organizations like the WTO, European Union, and the UN. Now, I think about a year or two ago, Britain got out of European Union. These are some of the arguments that are saying that what was happening is they felt that European Union was dictating how they should manage their market, and they were not happy with it. So they had a referendum and they got out of it. Now, whether that was a good idea or not, that's for another discussion. But these are some of the things. There have to be a balance. It's not all or nothing. There have to be a balance. So hopefully, the Brexit, that's what they call it, Brexit, from the European Union will be kind of a learning tool for other World Trade Organizations to know that they have to find a good balance. Critics argue that unelected bureaucrats have the power to impose policies on the democratically elected government of a nation or state. Supporters also claim that the power of these organizations is limited to what nation states agree to grant. So the power of organizations lie in the ability to get countries to agree to follow certain actions. So a country will want to maintain its sovereignty. Now, when these trade organizations come up with policies that seem to suggest like moving away or imposing a lot of restrictions on the country, they feel threatened and they think that their national sovereignty is being taken away. And that will lead to things like Brexit. So let's move to the next slide. Let's look at how globalization is affecting the world's poor. Well, is the gap between the rich nations and the poor nations getting wider? Well, I think it depends on how you look at it. But I would say that a lot of the developing countries that would otherwise not be able to open their markets to global trade have the opportunity now. And so that is, they may not be, you know, rich, but they are getting less poorer. So there's some positive there. Critics believe that if globalization was beneficial, there should not be a divergence between rich and the poor. Okay, I don't know about this one, but we can discuss that later. Supporters claim that the best way for the poor nations to improve their situation is to reduce barriers to trade and investment, implement economic policies based on free market economies, receive debt forgiveness for debt incurred under totalitarian regimes. Now, we would learn more about policies that led to this kind of relief. So stay tight. How does the global market affect managers? Remember, we are in the business. This is an introduction to international business. So we need to come down to see how these things affect managers. Managing an international business differs from managing a domestic business, because there's so many things that you have to consider. Differences in countries, language, the range of problems confronted in an international business is wider. The problems are more complex than those in the domestic market or domestic business. You have to learn new things. You become vulnerable to different rules and regulations in a foreign country. Firms have to find ways to work within the limits imposed by that country's government, intervention in the international trade and investment system. Then we have international transactions involving converting money. We have to deal with the currency issues. So there are so many challenges that managers must think about. So in summary, this is what I encourage you to read the book. This is what we looked at globalization. That is how globalization is making an impact on the world's economy. We looked at factors driving globalization. This includes declining trade barriers and changes in how technology is used to improve communication, share information, and so forth. We also talked about briefly about the collapse of communism and how they've helped to increase impact of globalization. Consequences of globalization. We looked at how trade is growing faster than output, more opportunities for developing countries. So the gap is maybe not necessarily, we won't say it's widening, but they're improving. Increased competition in the global market because markets in the foreign developing countries are kind of improving and actually becoming very competitive. Now, on the other side, we looked at loss of jobs in the domestic market. A lot of people are feeling that in the US right now. We look at that too. Then we look at the range of challenges for managers of international business. When you move outside your country, it becomes more complex, more challenging to manage maybe workers. You work with limited resources, you have to learn new things, you have to deal with new regulations, rules and regulations, some that you don't understand, but if you work in that environment, you have to work, admit to that or deal with that. Government restrictions, international monetary transactions, and so forth. So this is a summary of what we learned in chapter 1. So take some time, read chapter 1. This is just, as I said, the slides is a summary of what is in chapter 1. But read it and bring your questions to class next Saturday. I wish you all the best and welcome again to Introduction to International Business. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye. Thank you.